Could a new bill make it a crime for priests to keep the seal of confession? Hey, I'm Father David Michael Moses. I'm a Catholic priest, and if you appreciate these kind of videos, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Let's check out this story and see what it has to do with our religious freedom and the seal of confession.
A lawmaker is fighting to change state and religious law.
Yeah, this proposal calls on priests and members of clergy to report child abuse and neglect. So on paper, it sounds pretty simple, but as Fox 13's AJ Janovel reports, the debate is becoming contentious over religious implications.
The reason this is controversial is because this law would require priests to report abuse that they learned about through confession, something that goes against their religion.
So obviously, any kind of abuse, especially from priests, is just absolutely horrific. That's not really what this conversation is about. This conversation is more about religious freedom, actually. The seal of confession is in place to protect the penitent. It's not there to protect the priest. It's there so that people can know that they can bring their sins and that those sins can be held in confidence.
Senator Noel Frame has been pushing to change state law for years to add priests and clergy to the list of mandated reporters of abuse. This year is different, though. She's pushing the law forward without any restrictions, specifically when it comes to confession.
At a personal human level, couldn't stomach the idea of having an exemption any longer, and I think we need to go straight to all clergy should report child abuse and neglect, no matter what context in which they learn that information.
Very, very important to note that priests do report abuse regularly. If somebody comes to the parish office and says that they've been abused, then we call the police. We call all the proper channels to make sure that that evil stops immediately. We take that very, very seriously. That was a very clear part of our training in seminary, is that we are mandatory reporters anytime we're made aware of abuse outside of the context of confession. So just make that very, very clear that priests and church staff do report abuse and do work really, really hard to fight against that. And really the heart of this is that the sins don't belong to the priest. The priest is acting in the person of Christ. The sins belong to God. So it's not even within the right of the priest to reveal those. In fact, if a priest breaks the seal of confession, he gets excommunicated. So two things I would say: priests just wouldn't do this. Like, priests would go to jail before they would break the seal of confession, because then they would lose their priesthood. And it would be going against our entire understanding of the sacrament and what we're trying to do for people. So you pass a law like this, you're going to have just a lot of priests you're going to have to put in prison. So it doesn't make any sense to do that. The other thing worth saying here is that people bring sins because they know that they're held in confidence. People just would probably stop confessing sins if they knew they weren't held in confidence. It undermines the entire sacrament, the entire understanding of religious freedom in that sense. So again, it wouldn't even be an effective law, because then people probably just wouldn't bring their sins there. Here's an analogy that might be helpful to make that point. As a kid, if you do something wrong and you're deciding whether or not you should tell your parents, you're probably weighing what their response is going to be. If you know that your parent is going to, let's say, ground you for the next 10 years, then you might be less likely to tell your parents. But if you know that they're going to respond with mercy and they're going to try to help you get out of the situation, then you're more likely to tell your parents if there's a trust there, right? So for the church, we do ask people to bring their sins, but we do also say that those sins are sealed. If people feel like those sins are going to be broadcast to the world, then they're less likely probably to bring them to their spiritual fathers.
Has the right to confess their sins without worrying their sins will become public. The penalty for breaking that seal is excommunication.
Bishop Frank Schuster says he supports this effort, but says including confession is a violation of their freedom of religion.
This is a sacrament that comes from Christ, you see. That's it. This is coming from the Lord, this sacrament. And so it's impossible for a priest to comply this bill in this one instance.
You're failing us. If religious communities don't want to put members of their clergy into an impossible situation, then they can change their doctrine and their rules.
I reached out to the Washington State Catholic Conference, who responded with a statement that reads in part, "The Washington State Catholic Conference, representing the 5 Catholic bishops, are supportive of making sure clergy report reasonable suspicions of abuse. However, we do ask that the state respects our right to practice our religion and make an exemption for information received in the sacrament of confession."
I want to take a look at this quote from a bishop in Spokane, Bishop Daly. He says, clergy are committed to keeping the seal of confession, even to the point of going to jail. Exactly. I would definitely go to jail before I broke the seal of confession. That would totally undermine my entire priesthood. The sacrament of penance is sacred and will remain that way. And he makes it very, very clear that the diocese does so much to protect children and that they have a zero tolerance policy for abuse. If anyone is caught having committed any kind of abuse, then they're done, as it should be. At the end of the day, the way things stand right now, people can bring their deepest, darkest sins, whatever it is, to the confessional, and we can actually do something about it. We can actually have a conversation to say, hey, this is horrible. God can forgive, God does forgive, but you need to make sure this never happens again. Whatever the sin is, the fact that they can bring it to confession, that we can actually talk about it and make sure it never happens again, I think is much better than closing the door to the confessional and saying you have to deal with it on your own. So that would be my reaction to this. Tell me what you guys think in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. God bless.